In this, I hope, short video, I'm going to make a quick, I hope, overview of what you're going to find in the box of the game In Force to Heaven that is already up in pre-order on the VUCA page. There were some questions of quantity of components in the game, and of course questions why so much and what are all those components for. So this is what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to explain shortly every of those components. Of course, I don't have physical copy of the game yet, and I don't want to show on you any of those on my prototype copy, as some of components are not updated. So I will do it with Vassal module and online materials that I already have. And those materials are going to be almost as they will be printed. There are some minor changes, we are doing some final corrections, but mostly everything will look just like it is in here. So let's start. We're going to go step by step with the list from the VUCA page. So number one is, of course, and I will be marking those out on this list of game components. So, well, box is a box. Then we're going to have the first thing when you open the box is going to be this: how to start sheet. And this sheet is going to look like this. It's going to be one page, and its art is based on the real Call to Arms from 1939, which looks like this. And this will be simply how to start guide. If you open the box and you know nothing about this game, let's start here. And this will tell you step by step and answer some of your maybe initial questions about the game. On the back of this page, there are going to be guidelines how to start campaign, if you like to start from the campaign scenario. And on the bottom, we're going to have a storage solution for buggies, because the game will include a sticker sheet with stickers to be organized on counter trays or buggies, however you like to use them. And additionally, in the counter sheets, let me find those. Did I open those? No, I did not. In the counter sheets, we are going to have a little numbers next to our counters that are not yet here, but on the trash space, like for example here we have a little gap. In all counters you're going to have a small numbers that will indicate what sticker do they apply. So you will be able to organize your game straight out from the box and have it organized, ready to play. So that was the where is it? Sticker sheets. We knock this off, and how to start sheet. We're going to have, of course, master rulebook, which is self-explanatory and already able to download from the VUCA page. We will have a learning rulebook, which is going to be additional booklet with rules taken from the main rulebook and with the simplified form. So in the first scenarios you will only learn about basic movement and combat rules, and not everything that is more complex in later in the campaign game. This is why learning scenario complexity is only as 4, because first learning rulebook will not demand you to read more than 15 pages of rules, which are really not complicated, and they are wrote so extensively that they really take more place than they should. And we get up to maximum complexity of 10, which honestly, in my opinion, is not 10. This game is not really that complicated, but because of many new concepts in the war games, I decided to give it a 10. You know, do not lie to you that even for seasoned wargamers, those new concepts will be something to learn and something simply to take time and effort to learn if you want to play, but you will learn the game step by step. Then we're going to have let's go right back here. So this is how to start. Here we have learning rulebook and the main rulebook, and we're going to have scenario book. Scenario book is of course tied with the setup sheets, with scenario maps, and with map sheets. There are going to be 4 map sheets that in total will have the size that is written right here. 4 map sheets. Why not map sheets? Map sheet, but 4, because scenarios will vary in size. We're going to have 18 scenarios. Here is the scenario coverage on the page of the scenario book, and scenarios will use from little scenario maps, like here. It is all indicated in the scenario book, through half campaign games, scenarios that will use, for example, 2 campaign map sheets. There is one scenario which uses only 1 campaign map sheet, which is right here, knife in the back. It's only map D. And of course up to main campaign, where we will use all 4 campaign maps and play on the big board. As for campaign scenarios, we will have the biggest one, which is called Fall Weiss, and it is the full game. But if you like to play campaign, but not really start from the beginning, or not play all of it, we're going to have smaller campaign scenarios, which, for example, take place in only 1 week. Like Border Battle starts at 1st, ends at 7th, Fallback starts at 6th, Counteroffensive at 9th, and Endgame starts at September 17th and ends in 25th. Difference between, for example, Border Battle scenario and Fall Weiss is in victory conditions, because in the full campaign you will not have any victory points. There are only sudden death goals, and right here we are going to have some victory point goals that have to be reached mostly by German player before the end of the first week. So campaign maps are also self-explanatory, and scenario maps vary in size from A4 size, small, which is right here. We have 3 of them. One is for scenario 1, which also have setup printed in it. Second one is for learning scenario 2, and the third one is for learning scenario 3. All of those scenarios use simplified set of rules, which are going to find in the learning rulebook. Then we have 2 maps for the larger size, which is A3. This is also learning scenario number 4, which uses some of the main rules from the main rulebook. And we have scenario number 5. On little scenario maps, not only that those are going to be printed separately, but also we're going to have partial setup on the map. Not without numbers of units, but just positions of units that are set on the map. And here we have, let's call it the largest maps, which are going to be A2 size, one for scenario 7, 3 of them, second for, and we have a lot more of special scenario options printed on them, one for scenario 8 and one for scenario 10, which will load right. Will it load or will it not? No. Okay. Going along with campaign scenarios and small scenarios, we are going to have setup sheets, which is going to be 16 of them. Why so much? Because to ease you startup of any scenario that you like, you're going to have basically setup, display, and some other informations for every scenario that you will find in the scenario book. This is done mainly to simply ease your startup of the game. Up to campaign, which is a bit of joint setup, which joint setup of some scenarios that start the same as campaign, meaning on the September 1st. And on the final page, we are going to have general reinforcements for Poland and for Germany for the whole campaign. Then we're going to have two track sheets. Well, that's component that is basically needed for the game. And let's mark those out. Scenario booklet, setup sheets, track sheets, scenario maps, and counter sheets. No, counter sheets not yet. So track sheets are going to be two of them, and those are used simply to hold some informational markers and track a turn, time of a day. Some are used with special mechanics, and one of important things is we're not going to have separate sheets with holding boxes for cards or for destroyed units, for example. It will be the edge of a track sheet. So for example, destroyed units will be placed right here next to the track sheet, isolated units right here. And here we have some holding places for some cards that are going to be used in campaign scenarios. Next one is player aids. We're going to have two player aids in form of 16-page booklet. We decided that we are not going to use separate sheets to lay down all over the table. Those are going to be booklets that will contain everything that you need to play. They're going to have some basic information about counters, general course of play, some tables, sequence of play, terrain effects chart, as well as combat results tables, and some needed tables that are all indicated in the rulebook. Well, when do you need to use those? Additionally, we're going to have markers aid and flowcharts that are going to be especially useful in the learning process of the scenario of first scenarios. And they have steps marked L1 to L3, which indicate which of the steps of the initial course of learning the game you are going to use and which are going to be postponed. For example, we do not use any artillery in the first three scenarios, therefore there is no marking of L1 to L3. There is also some other aid, which is unit abilities. So you will always have handy reference to some abilities that are on the units. Important rules, easy to forget. Here is what is called the PQR, so Procedures Quick Reference for activations. Master reinforcement schedule, so you won't need to really use or set up your marker sheets with all of the reinforcements. All is right here, which with marked scenario numbers when some units or some markers enter the game. And as the last page, there's a schedule of Soviet advance, which comes up when the Soviets attack Poland. So these were the player aids in two booklets for two players. We're going to have multiple player rules, but player aids are going to be just two, but I suppose those will be online resources, so if you'd like to print some extra, there will be no problem with this. We're going to have marker holding box sheet, which is what I call markers library. It's going to be in thick paper, so you can take it up and not spill everything everywhere. And this is basically a holding box for markers with with some paragraph links. So when you prepare the game, you can, instead of throwing all of your counters around, you can organize those counters in this tray and have them and pass by over the table. It's already checked on the convention and works really good. It's not really must-have component, but it really eases play. So we're going to have 10 counter sheets. 10 counter sheets, 9 counter sheets that are, let's call them basic counter sheets, and one special counter sheet which will hold counters that are in odd shapes. We're going to have larger and smaller counters, as well as hexagonal counters and round counters, mostly for activation cheats and some cheats needed for the campaign. Also on the sides there are going to be what is called ACDs, Army Command Displays. Those components are also not really are not necessary for the gameplay, but if you have some informational counters or some useful counters like artillery, logistics, state, stance, combat or movement, some additional units under command or losses report, instead of keeping them loosely around the map, you will have a thick cardboard that you can place them and organize where your army is, or make your something like HQ table, something like this. It's going to be up to you. Hexagonal counters are going to be mainly HQs, but there are also going to be some useful counters, like for example defensive line counters, which can be seen right here. And if I open the vassal module, for example, informational counters, defensive line counters are going to be used to mark where are defensive lines that I need to be defended on September 1st. So basically this is how it will look on the table. There are a lot of informational markers. I might just give you a quick overview what are those are for. So here we have, I'm going to zoom it a bit. Here we have units. Here we have markers that are used as a DFR. Sorry, those are isolated markers, so they mark isolated state. There are two markers that are used for the Polish Air Force. Here we have weather marker, time marker, and marker indicating whose initiative it is. Here are some air units, some shock markers to indicate shock state of a unit. Here we have activation cheats. Here we have some Polish units with artillery. Here are disrupted markers that are also mark the state of a unit. Here are some also Navy units, Polish Navy units in this case. Here we have what is called divisional artillery markers that will be kept on ACDs and used when they are used. They're simply marked used on the back. Here are markers for units, divisions that detach regiments. Those are marked on the map. Here we have remnant counters that are used with the optional rule that basically works that if a division is destroyed, you are not removing it from the map. You place remnants which have strength of 0, and when you rebuild a division, instead of rebuilding it on the HQ, you might be able to rebuild it on the remnant marker. So basically you go back with your units back where they were. Here are some clearing markers marking major cities to be cleared. Here are control markers, and here we have fortress defense garrison markers that will be placed on the map according to the setup. Then we jump to some informational markers like Westerplatte defense, morale marker, Warsaw destruction, date, phase, replacements. Those are markers for trucks. Here we have markers that you mark your infantry units, where are they planning to attack according to the game rules. Here are daily reports. Basically, when the army gets losses, step losses, you mark all of those during the day on your ACDs, and then you might get some extra replacements at the end of the day. Legendary battle markers are used with morale rules. when there are conditions to get legendary battle, you simply place this marker on the map. Here are refugee markers that might block the roads and be created in case of town and city battles, and they march towards major cities. Here are some German fleet units and German DFR markers, which mark how many steps of how many hexes of movement infantry unit have used. Here we have markers to mark if your army is in the pocket, how many days of fight do they have left. Here is deteriorating logistical state of an army, which is also marked on ACD. Some trains, some spearheads, those are for panzer and tank units that deploy spearheads. More on this in the rules. Here are some pontoon bridges and attempt through the major river crossing. And here are some Polish air bases. Here are also activation cheats. Here we have stance markers for armies. And here we have some extra cheats for some special rules like Warsaw mandatory attack, Prussia restriction for units that start in Prussia, unit for restriction markers for Slovak units, and here are some command markers that are used to indicate under which army the unit is commanded, also used on the ACD. Here is special high tide marker. This is used when the Soviets advance. Basically, as far as German units are to the east of the map, those units have to stop, and this is marked with the high tide. German units cannot cross the high tide border anymore to the end of the campaign. Here we have Polish command markers, some additional markers with Polish armies that might be used with some cards, and some other extra markers that are all explained in the rulebook. Here are markers for special optional rule if you want to conceal your army. Here are German Luftwaffe units. And here we have extra special sheet which contain Polish armored trains and transport trains. Here we have 4 markers for the names when the Polish player reorganizes armies into fronts. You place those on your ACDs, and then, for example, Army Modlin turns into Północny Front or the Northern Front. Here we have some extra victory markers for scenarios that you can place on the map to indicate where are your victory conditions. Here we have handy, thick CRT that you will be able to place wherever you want on the map. And here is the combat marker that you will use to help you check and work with DRMs on this combat results table. On the back of it, there's another city combat results table. And here we have extra big, large counters that are used for Soviet fronts. And I will actually show you back of this sheet, which is also on the back of any ACD, of every ACD, you're going to have historical order of battle. So it will be helpful to gather all of the units if you like to. And on the back of those Soviet fronts, we're going to actually have Russian markings. And on the back of ACD, CRT, there is a smaller city combat results table. So this is how counter sheets will look in this game. Let's mark those out. 100 cards. Cards are used a bit differently than in other games, and I will show you this with Vassal module. So we basically going to have few different decks, and those decks are not any kind of action cards. We do not have this in here. In here, we're going to have first Plan West cards, which are informational and will show you what are the special conditions of Plan West cheat when it comes. Second one is the General Staff, which indicates where is Polish General Staff and what are conditions to evacuate this General Staff. And when you go further, you simply just place different cards. Here is Polish counteroffensive card, which helps Polish players start the counteroffensive, and it will have place for 2 Polish extra army markers to indicate which armies take part in the counteroffensive. So those cards are kind of informational handy cards. Here we're going to have Soviet and Allied decks, and this is what takes majority of those cards in the game. And those cards work a bit like a timer along with the time, with the date track. So here we have our calendar, so turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and so on. And every day have a card. So there's a September 1st, September 2nd, September 3rd. Some cards some cards are doubled. So you randomly put, for example, 1 of 2 September 3, and some of those cards have some, for example, events that happen on them. But this is one thing. The second, more important thing is that this deck will basically govern Allied offensive and Soviet offensive. Those cards work like this. You flip the card, for example, when there is a declaration of war, when Western Allies declare a war on Third Reich, you start working with Soviet and Allied deck. And those cards will most often tell you that, for example, place Allies 2 cards randomly on top of calendar decks 3, 4, and 5 days later. So you place, for example, this card on September 6th, the next one on September 7th, and so on. And when the time comes, when you, for example, you hit September 6th and you have on the top some Allied card, you flip it, you resolve it, and then you resolve your September 6th card, which might or might not have some, for example, random events. As for the Allied offensive, this is mostly informational and have some influence on morale because, of course, Allied offensive did not reach Poland in 1939. But as for the Soviet offensive, it is very important because those cards will govern Soviet entry to Poland from the east. And some of those cards have conditions that are tied with German advances on the eastern part of Poland. So, for example, Soviet intervention is imminent if at least 1 hex of Warszawa is under German control or Białystok is under German control, then take 6 cards and place them randomly 2 and 3 days from the current date. This means that the more Germans push east, with those cards, the more imminent will be Soviet advance. And for example, this card, 2 cards, 6. 1 card is no news for Moscow, and the second one is that the Soviet army is ready to attack. Oh, there it is, right here. You need to get this card and this card exactly. Khalkhin Gol battle ends, and there is a ceasefire between Soviets and Japanese armies. And with those 2 cards, when the card come up that the Soviets start the invasion, then the Soviets start the invasion. And then we're going to use Soviet invasion schedule and introduce into the map those large Soviet counters. Plus we had space for some additional handy player aid cards, so we're going to have a little card that helps you manage retreats from the combat and, for example, colors of the bridges. So this is what 100 cards are here for in this game. And by the way, as mentioned before, you don't need to wait 60 hours of game to see how the Soviet offensive goes. You can simply open scenario, for example, scenario 17 endgame and start on September 17th, right from the start when the Soviet offensive starts. And we're going to have 120 wooden cubes. To be honest, all of those cubes are not needed for most of the games. It is only for the sake of complicity that you will not lack any components to play the full campaign. Because wooden cubes, as you can see on the map, we have different colors of bridges. We have red bridges, gray bridges, yellow bridges, we have orange bridges. Basically, when the German offensive goes, we check what is the state of the bridge. And when the bridge is destroyed, for example, orange, you mark it with the orange cube. When the gray bridge is destroyed, you mark it with the gray cube. When the bridge is repaired or found intact, you mark it with the white cube, and the German players can use this bridge. In the player 8, we have reference because difference between colors of those bridges are basically in numbers and odds how easily is such a bridge easy to destroy and then to rebuild. Some bridges, like red bridges, which are right here on the Wisła River, once destroyed and marked with the red cube, cannot be rebuilt ever. So in most of scenarios we do not need 120 damn wooden cubes, but for the sake of complicity, you cannot lack any components if you like to play the full campaign. So this probably elevated the price of the game a little bit, but you know, someone would say that this game is incomplete if there wasn't 120 wooden cubes. So this is what wooden cubes are for. 2 dice, well, of course, nothing to explain right here. And then we have component that is not really necessary, but we decided with Patrick and Pablo that we will risk it to also elevate a bit the price of the game, but include this. So campaign booklet is nothing more than the historical campaign played with this game. Day by day, unit by unit, hex by hex, historical front from the September 1st up to the last day of the campaign. So you can use it as a reference, you can use it as a comparison to how your campaign goes, you can use it to find some, for example, inspirations, how to play your campaign, or simply just as a fun to look how did it look historically. So this is nothing more than just informational. And by the way, this historical campaign is perfectly played according to the rules. So every unit, every HQ movement, every Soviet front movement, everything to the beat is played according to existing rules that you're going to find in this game. So that's it. That's all components. Only 2 of those are not really necessary. This is the campaign book and 120 wooden cubes needed for the campaign, but not for most of the scenarios. But rest of components to give the game shape as it is, I think, were necessary. So with the other features, we have 1 turn is 1 day, we have 18 scenarios, and playing time is from 20 minutes for the learning scenario number 1 to the largest scenario, which is around 5 to 6 to 7 hours. 4 to 5 hours. And campaign, I'm trying to be honest here, the smallest campaign, half campaign scenario is around 14 hours, so it's basically easily one conventional meeting, and the largest campaign is 60 plus hours. No in here. Solitaire suitability is 9. It is not 10 because it's not a solo game, but we're going to have what is called a solo guidelines. So solo guidelines will not govern your units tactically, units of one side tactically, like it would be in the full-blown solo game, but it will govern of what to do operationally. So you will have basically random guidelines that you will note down on which victory conditions of scenario or campaign to focus with one of your sides. I find it very, very fun to play, and it creates really interesting and really ambush-like situations for one side. So I had such a great time, and I'm playing a lot of solo games, of dedicated solo games and solo modes. So I decided to give it a 9. Maybe you'll tell me that it's a mistake. Well, it's not 10 because it's not a solo game. So here it is, in Force to Heaven. So shortly, a box for map sheets, 10 counter sheets, 100 cards, 5 scenario maps. 5 means there will be printed two-sided, 2 player aid booklets, how to start sheet, 2 track sheets, 16 setup sheets for every scenario, 1 rule book, 1 scenario book, 1 learning rule book to start playing, 1 campaign book with the historical scenario, 1 marker holding box to have it handy as a placeholder for your markers, sticker sheets for storage solution, 120 mini wooden cubes for bridges, and 2 six-sided dice. This is how it looks. I hope this might help you decide if you like to ever try this game or not. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found it interesting. Have a great day and see you in the future.